right, guys, where does blaming your own fans for giving up a 17-point a lead in a loss on Tuesday night, where does that rank among worst reasons or worst excuses for losses? UCLA coach blaming his own fans for giving up a 17-point lead against the Gophers the other night. Joe, I'll
Dude,
start with you.
Mick Cronin is he's a character. It's him and Danny Hurley who are. I mean, I'll say this. I'll admit this. If they were coaching a team that I was a fan of, I would 100% support it because it's entertainment. My God, when you watch them from afar and you're not their fan,
Yeah.
it's kind of disgusting. You know, it's a big time turnoff, if you know what I mean. It's like you don't want to be that guy. And they are that guy every time they coach and every time they speak to the media. It's almost like they're attempting to say something stupid. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think we need more psycho coaches in college basketball. I
think you're going to get more of them with all the coaches leaving college sports for professional sports lately.
Yeah, I mean the Hall of Fame coaches like Jay Wright, Coach K, Roy Williams, Tony Bennett, they're all out the door, and now we get Danny Hurley, Mick Cronin, Nate Oates that just love to scream in refs' faces and make stupid comments after their press conferences. But I mean, as a college basketball fan, I like it. I think it's fun. If I was a high school recruit, I kind of like the psycho coach energy. So I don't know. I think it's good for college basketball. It gets people talking. If I was a UCLA fan, I don't know. They're an interesting program because they have all this history, and then you just have this 5'2" coach just screaming absolute nonsense after the press conferences. But I don't know. It seems to be, I guess, working for him to an extent. But I don't know. It's a weird comment to make when your team blows a 17-point lead.
I mean, here's the thing. It's like that. I mean, it's a bad comment. I think any way you slice it, like it just is not a good look. And it's not the first time this season he had the press conference earlier in the year where he's just throwing all the players under the bus. But that being said, there might be something to it. You know, Jalen Clark for the Wolves, he comes in, he's playing really well right away. He kind of makes the most of his opportunity. Where did he learn that? He said UCLA with Mick Cronin. He said that he learned how to play to not make mistakes there because freshman year, kind of the same thing. If you're making mistakes, just yank you out of there. There might be something to it. Maybe a little crazy can go a long way. But you know, obviously, it's not a very good look to be bashing players and fans and anything else in the media. Usually, the complete opposite of what you're supposed to be doing as a coach. But
yeah, the most
you might be doing something right in the locker room.
The most intense coaches seem to be associated with really good programs, and it doesn't seem to matter what level you're coaching at. You know, Gophers assistant coach Dave Thorson was the head coach at De La Salle and won a whole bunch of championships in Minnesota high school basketball. And if you'd ever gone to a De La Salle basketball game when Coach Thorson was on the sideline, it's a surprise that man still has a voice at all because he was screaming and yelling the entire time. And it was fun to watch. But it was one of those deals where it's like, there's an expectation. He said it. He's going to be respectful to the officials, unlike Danny Hurley. But, man, he will get on a player. But it's all in love and all in coaching and all in trying to improve everybody's game. You know, it's like those professors or teachers you have in school or college, the man or woman that you are afraid to let down, where you will not forget to do your homework that day. You are doing it because the wrath of freaking God sits on the other side of failing to show up. That's what those coaches do. I kind of like that. And Tony, you're like, I would play for a guy like that. Well, yeah, hell yeah, you would, because if you don't, you're going to hear about it and it's going to be terrifying. So there's something to be said. Look at the Wayzata high school coach, right here in Minnesota.
Jeez.
Brian Schnettler.
Oh my goodness.
He just went nuts the other night. He got suspended for a game because he went so crazy on the sideline. But he's a great coach, and everybody has nothing but good things to say about him. Yeah, did he lose his cool and look kind of stupid for a little bit? Sure, it happens, but that's the job, right? You're on the sideline, everybody sees you. There's pressure. I mean, even in high school, it happens all the time. So it's just kind of a thing where if you are that guy, you tend to be a winner. Maybe Ben Johnson needs to go a little bit more nuts to
I
have
was gonna
ultimate
say,
success at Minnesota.
it feels like after this conversation, after the first 6 minutes, the general gist of it, what I'm getting is that Ben Johnson needs to add a little crazy to his coaching, and then the Gophers will succeed more.
Sleep less, drink more coffee, and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, if you do look at all the great coaches in college basketball right now, they all are kind of psycho. Bruce Pearl, Nate Oates, Kelvin Sampson, even to an extent at Houston. They all got a little crazy in them.
Dude, did you guys see the Rick Pitino halftime speech at St. John's the other night?
Yeah, him too,
Oh
obviously.
my God. I instantly went to work out after watching that because I'm like, I got the message loud and clear. And I don't even play basketball, and I'm 41 years old. I mean,
You
that's
play
the kind of
basketball, not
you
that kind of
love that
basketball, but
stuff. You gotta love that. You die for something like that. That's amazing. It's great leadership.
Joe, I've
Blaming
got.
the fans though is stupid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's not going to work out for you long term. Absolutely not. I already asked these two guys earlier this week, Joe. You weren't on, but I want to get your opinion on it. Now you have the UCLA game to use as analysis here. Can the Gophers make the tournament?
Yeah, I'm on a different wavelength than Tony, and I didn't see the video. Sorry guys, I didn't watch it. So I have no idea what Nolan thinks, but I'm of the opinion that a guy like Joe Lunardi in his bracketology keeps putting 10 Big Ten teams in. And I know it's not just like, hey, it's the Big Ten, so 10 teams are getting in, right? It could drop to 9, it could drop to 8, depending on who's at the bottom of that list. But Minnesota's only a half game behind in the conference standings. The 10th place team, Nebraska, entering play Thursday night. They're one game behind the 9th place team, Ohio State, who they should have beaten if it weren't for a bunch of mistakes late in that game and an overtime. So the difference between Minnesota being a tourney team or on the bubble, at least, is some bad losses in the non-conference season and some very close calls during the conference season. So it's kind of a question for me: is the NCAA tournament committee going to look at this team that's suddenly won 6 out of 9 in one of the best conferences in the country, or are they going to look at the team and punish them for their woes early in the season? I wonder if there's a little bit more forgiveness in the new era of transfer portal when teams have so much turnover, like Minnesota has had. Maybe it just takes time. And the real version, the best version, is a tournament caliber team, while the full resume doesn't look like one. So if you're part of the selection committee, how are you going to weigh those things, right? So, I know it's the whole body of work and nothing will probably change, but if the Gophers finish 10-10 in conference play, which would mean a 4-1 finish, that means they have to beat Nebraska for sure. They probably have to beat Wisconsin, who's the 11th ranked team in the country and a massive quad 1 opportunity. They cannot lose to Penn State. Is that Saturday, I think?
Yep.
And I think the last game is Rutgers. I don't know what else is in there. I think I hit them all. But if you go 4-1 and you're 10-10 in the Big Ten and you start to inch closer to 20 wins, I think you got a shot as long as you don't get bounced in your first Big Ten tournament game.
Tony, I know when during the UCLA game you mentioned that this is the second season in a row where the Gophers just got going too late in the season. What do they need to do to not have put themselves in such a hole early on in the season next year? I know we've talked about it a number of times. There's just going to be so many new players and pieces on this roster next year. How do the Gophers prevent from digging themselves a giant hole to start the season where they have to climb out and be on this potential bubble and try and find a way to sneak in and hope that they can do that late in the season? What do they got to do to make sure that doesn't happen next year?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting discussion because you could look at revisionist history, and if they don't score 14 points in the first half against North Texas and they hit that 3 that bounce on the rim a few times against Wichita State, like those 2 games, if they go the other way, I think we're realistically talking about a team that could be on the bubble. But those are 2 bad losses, and it is the full body of work. And I think they used to do like last 10 game sample size in the NCAA selection, but I think they've said they don't do that anymore. I could be wrong there, but I guess to avoid this issue in the future, It's non-conference scheduling, which is, I think, one of my biggest concerns and gripes with the state of the Gophers program right now. Is the last 5 years they've scheduled in the non-conference really not much different than a program like St. Thomas does, and I think it's pretty inexcusable to have North Texas as your top non-conference game at home as a Big Ten program. I don't have a look into who's making those decisions, and I do know it's a combination of the coaching staff and the athletic department, but it's just inexcusable. They were supposed to have a away game against Missouri because Missouri played at home this year. I think that might get pushed back to next year. I could be wrong, but um, it just, if they had 2 or 3 of those games on the schedule, maybe one goes the right direction. You're looking at a team that's on the bubble right now, and they had one of the worst non-conference schedules in the country again for the second straight year, and that's really all it comes down to. They've disregarded non-conference play for some reason, and it's cost them 2 years in a row.
Well, look at Ohio State. I mentioned Ohio State's, I think, 7-9 in conference play. The Gophers are 6-9. Ohio State's 15-11. It's not like they're putting together this monster season, but Joe Lunardi looks at them as a tournament team. Well, why is that? Well, look at their non-conference schedule. They played number 19 Texas in the opener. They beat them. Obviously, that helps. They played number 23 Texas A&M and lost. They played Pitt. They played Auburn and got beat by nearly 40 points. Even Valpo is a solid or a better non-conference team than most of the squads the Gophers faced. They beat Kentucky by 20. I mean, they gave themselves opportunities to make statements early in the season, and now look at them. You can lose a bunch of those games, but as long as your non-conference schedule isn't filled with quad 3 and 4 opponents, it looks a lot better. A quad 1 loss, even if you're getting blown out, is better than a quad 3 or 4 victory. That's just the truth of the matter. So you have to give yourself that opportunity, and Tony's right. They have not done that, and it has to change.
What do you think the non-conference schedule would have looked like, though, had they kept it together? I bet it would have looked a lot different. Instead, you got to try to now you got to try to create a whole new, fresh roster of entirely new faces and see how they can play together. So you can do that against good teams, but you can also do that against teams that aren't quite so good. So you can actually try to figure out the issue's just the money. They can't keep it together.
Yeah, and what's interesting, if they had Pharrell Payne, Elijah Hawkins, Josh Olu-Joseph, and Cam Christie, if he didn't go to the NBA, if they had all those guys back, they probably would have been really good. But they did have all those guys last year, and they were worse against top 25 competition than they are this year. So there's a whole bunch of different avenues you can take when you're analyzing this Gophers team and how they've coached and how they've performed. It's just a lot of inconsistencies that have made it very difficult to sustain success. It wasn't too long ago that we were sitting on this podcast and I was like, yeah, the Gophers have a chance to finish 12-2 and, push this 3-game winning streak where they've looked really good into a different realm and put themselves on the map. I mean, they had John Rothstein, they had Andy Katz talking about them. They still have those guys mentioning them when they come up with big time victories against UCLA. So there's something there. It just hasn't been consistent. Now they have another opportunity with 5 games left in the conference schedule to go on a bit of a run, make some noise, and at least have people sitting on the edge of their seats on Selection Sunday. That's not out of the realm of possibilities. I know Tony thinks it is. He's laughing because he's like, nah, man, it's going to take 20 wins and 3 Big Ten tournament victories, and they can't lose to Nebraska or Wisconsin. And he's probably right. That's a possibility. We could be sitting there on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I guess one last thing on the non-conference schedule thing. I totally get the rebuttal that some people have that might say, if you schedule all these teams and get blown out, what does it do? But they're not even trying to play those teams, and I just don't understand it. And it just kills interest in the team, interest in the program. And it's a lot easier if you have all these new players to get them up to play Kentucky or get them up to play even South Carolina or Texas A&M. But it's really hard to get them up to play Cleveland State and Central Michigan in the middle of November. So it feels like they just don't think the season starts until conference play, which it just baffles me. And Ben Johnson's proven that he can develop a team and improve throughout the year, 2 years in a row now. And the next step for this program, no matter who's coaching it next year, is to prove they can be a good team in November, because they just haven't done that. And that's why they're not going to be in the tournament discussion.
Going to switch the topics here a little bit. Sticking on the basketball side, though, Joe, you wrote about this earlier today over on Timberwolves on SI. Ant and KD having conversations during the All-Star break, potentially about KD coming to Minnesota. There were reports at the trade deadline that Phoenix and Minnesota may have had conversations. Kevin Durant was potentially open to that conversation of coming to Minnesota, which is big news in and of itself. But what's the possibility that this summer the Wolves make enough moves, Tim Connolly does his NBA president of basketball operations wizardry, and brings Kevin Durant to Minnesota to team up with apparently his really good buddy Anthony Edwards?
With zero steam, because that's not what I do. I don't know how to do that. I can read a lot of stuff, though, and come to some sort of conclusion, a logical conclusion. It feels like it's written in the stars, and it feels like it's just a matter of time before it happens, right? We've been talking about this for almost a year, since the Olympics, or since last year's playoffs, when Anthony Edwards and the Wolves were torching Kevin Durant and the Suns. What's it going to take to get it done? You're going to have to move some money, that's for sure. You're going to have to give up some talent. But if Julius Randle opts in to his contract for 31 or 33 million, whatever it is, you got to find some more money to trade, because Kevin Durant's due to make $54.7 million. But it's a heck of a lot easier to make a deal in the offseason than it is during the season before the trade deadline. Some of these restrictions from the second apron of the salary cap or the luxury tax might be gone. Nolan, you can speak to that. I don't know how they're going to get under that, or if it's even possible at this point, or if they still have restrictions. But John Krasinski says, and he's the alpha when it comes to Wolves insiding, that it will be easier to do, and it is something that the table is set for. The conversation is ready to be had. Brian Windhorst came out last week and said it's the worst kept secret in basketball. Everybody knows Kevin Durant's getting traded this summer. They're just going to enjoy the ride in Phoenix while it lasts, and they'll see how it goes this year. Now, if Phoenix makes a run to the championship this year or goes to the finals, maybe that changes the discussion. But as a team outside the top 10 as we speak right now, it doesn't look like that's even remotely possible. So they'll be looking to change things. And Anthony Edwards and Kevin Durant would be an incredible pairing, even if it's Durant's age 37 season. The dude has averaged at least 25 points per game every single season since his second year in the league, 2008-09. Tony, you were like 5. Nolan, you were like 6 at that time. I think I'm actually accurate, right? Like, you guys were little babies.
I was graduating from high school at that time.
You were guys who were still breastfeeding when Kevin Durant was in his second year in the NBA. And it is weird that you guys breastfed till you were 7. But it doesn't change the fact that Kevin Durant hasn't slowed down one bit. The dude is a machine. He's shooting 53% from the field and 41% from deep. It would be a dream scenario, and you would want to give up some capital and some talent to get a guy like that to give the Timberwolves an actual shot at winning a championship. They might do it this year. They might get hot and put everything together, and that changes the narrative too. But that's a dream scenario. Kevin Durant's come around once a generation, and if he can play in Minnesota for a year or two alongside a superstar like Anthony Edwards, you're a bona fide top 3 seed in the West, and you're guaranteed to be a threat to win the championship. So I think it's something that certainly gets revisited. There's just too much smoke, and where there's smoke, there's typically fire. And I think this is very legit, and I do think it will happen this summer.
Nolan, does a 37-year-old Kevin Durant make the Wolves the top contender in the West?
I'm going to say no, and I'm going to pretty much disagree with Joe entirely on this one. The whole purpose of trading Karl Anthony Towns was to build a team that can be competitive for a long time around Anthony Edwards, right? If you are trading for Kevin Durant, I feel like people kind of think you're getting rid of Julius Randle in a draft pick. It's going to take more than that. They're going to want Jaden, or they're going to want Nas, or they're going to want Rob, or a combination of multiple of those guys. So if you're giving up pieces that you think are going to be part of this long-term future, who are, I believe Jaden's 24, Nas is 25. Rob is 20. You're giving up these guys who are supposed to be a part of this team around Anthony Edwards for the next decade plus to get Kevin Durant, who we saw it in Phoenix. They put him with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. That hasn't worked. So just taking a great player and putting him alongside another great player, it doesn't always work. And I don't really see the fit there being super great either when you have just a bunch of ball dominant players. Like Kevin Durant is not a huge, like, it just doesn't seem like it would be a huge fit with Ant. And he's 37. He's going to be 37 next year.
Mhm.
You have him for a year or two. You think you're going to win a title just with that when you're losing who knows who? I don't think it's a move that really is going to work out too well. I don't think they'll do it. I don't think they'll give up that much. I also think there are teams that have more to offer. You could take a look at, like, say, an OKC that has 20 million draft picks and a ton of young talent. They can probably offer more than the Wolves can or would be willing to move. So I don't know. I don't like the idea. I think they should ride it out and stick with the vision that they started this last offseason.
You're forgetting a couple of things, and first and foremost, a conspiracy theory here is that Adam Silver is going to say Kevin Durant wants to play in Minnesota with Anthony Edwards. It's good for the game. We're going to put the young superstar next to the old superstar, and we're going to wheel and deal that magic for a season or two. So,
Are you telling me the NBA is going to rig something?
I don't
No,
care what you want to
never.
do, Matt Ishbia. You're trading him to Minnesota. So there's the conspiracy theory part. And now, if you want to get in the ring, let's box, because let me ask you this. Would you trade, forget about money, let's just say this was on the table. This was something you could do. Jaden McDaniels and that Detroit first-round pick in this summer's NBA draft for Kevin Durant. Would you do that?
Just straight up those two. Do you think the Suns would do that?
No, I'm just asking, would you do that?
Yeah,
if that's what it took.
I would.
You'd probably do that.
Okay. So now, would you do Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels in that first-round pick for Kevin Durant?
I see. The thing is I don't think Kevin Durant really makes this team that much better. You're losing Jaden for a guy you'd have for a decade, for a 1-year rental of Durant, really.
Okay, here
And you're losing Randall.
Randall's going to be gone in a
first-round
year
pick.
anyway. Randall's going to be gone in a year anyway.
Probably.
So
Probably, but you have the
actually
option
looked
right
at
now
it,
is if you have him opt in, you can make a trade for him somewhere else.
Yep,
and get more.
You could certainly, but nobody wants him, so you're not going to get much for him. But if you can just package him, and Phoenix would want him because they're like, hey, he's got an expiring contract. See you later. And Minnesota is not going to have to pay as much for Durant because he's on an expiring contract, and Phoenix knows he's not going to re-sign with them. So it's like their hands are tied a little bit here, unless they just want to run it back and piss off a 37-year-old man who is not afraid to sulk a little bit and maybe create a fake Twitter account and post some things about the organization. So if you can trade Julius Randle and Jaden McDaniels in that Detroit first-round pick, that's a valuable package for a guy they'd be losing anyway. You can replace Jaden McDaniels with Jalen Clark. I mean, that's a beautiful future there. He's basically a Jaden clone, right?
Jalen Clark is 6'3". Jaden McDaniels is like 6'10".
The size is
There's a huge size difference. Jalen
Clark's a lot
Jaden's
closer
length.
than Nah.
Yeah, Jalen Clark is the Nah. It could be a replacement for Nah. Like if the Wolves decide to let Nah walk in the offseason. But Jaden, the length, the way he can defend with that length, he can defend 1 through 5. You can switch him on to anybody. That's not something Jalen Clark is going to be able to do as far as guard 5s. And Jaden also has a lot more of at this particular moment, a lot more of in his offensive skill set than Jalen too.
Kevin Durant,
that's not a
decent defender too when he wants to be. So I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just saying, guys, it's like
maybe a few years ago.
I think what's going to happen is that Jaden, Randall, and that first-round pick are going to get dealt to Phoenix. Kevin Durant's going to come here. And guess what? If Durant plays one season in Minnesota, all of a sudden $54 million are off the books. You have no long-term deal with Jaden McDaniels, which is paying him some good money. You've got a lot of money to go out and sign some young stud or some bona fide star to go next to Anthony Edwards for the long run anyway. And by that time, Rudy Gobert will be on an expiring contract. So, and Rob Dillingham, you still have him. You're not losing your future De'Aaron Fox potentially, right?
Well, like, you could also Phoenix could be like, that's who we want. We want Rob.
Well, if they want Rob, then you don't give up that Detroit first-round pick. And if they're going to play hardball, then you just wait it out. And you're like, well, the draft's here. If you want this pick or not, Okay, no, Rob's off limits. Their
Yeah,
hands are tied. Minnesota has the leverage here. Any team trying to trade for Kevin Durant has the leverage because Phoenix knows Durant's not going to return.
I agree, and I have a feeling that the market for a 37-year-old Kevin Durant might not be that strong on the trade market. It, I think it just all comes down to what the Wolves would have to give up. Could they even do something like Julius Randle and Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark or something, and add a couple picks into that?
I don't think
And
the
you
money
even
works
keep
there,
Jaden
but
McDaniels. But that's a pretty extreme scenario, I guess. But it all comes down to the package. I think Kevin Durant would be an interesting fit, but the other side of trading Jaden McDaniels, it's probably Ant's best friend on the team now, and he's younger, has longer to play in the NBA. He's almost just a younger version of Kevin Durant. Obviously, nowhere near the same offensive player. But there's a lot of benefits to keeping McDaniels compared to getting Durant.
if Anthony Edwards was standing on a dock and there were piranhas swimming all over the ocean floor, and Kevin Durant and Jaden McDaniels both fell in, and Ant could only save one, who do you think he's going to pull out of the water?
McDaniels. I think the
Nope.
Durant thing's overblown.
He's taking KD and he's saying, "So long, you're fish food, Jaden." That's 100% what would happen. I guarantee it. Guarantee it.
Disagree.
He doesn't care about Jaden that much. He loves KD.
He's played with Jaden for 4 years now. KD's just his like idol.
Jaden, Nas, and Ant have all been together since the beginning here.
I've known my brothers my whole life, and I don't even talk to two of them. So whatever.
Didn't realize we had Aaron Rodgers on the call here.
It's a developing situation.
All right. Lastly, last question here. This doesn't have to take long. Twins start spring training this Saturday against the Braves. What's your level of excitement for the Twins this season? I'll go around the horn. Joe, start with you.
Oh, I mean, I'm excited for the first Twins.tv game when that comes on because I want to see what the new broadcast is like. It'll probably sound almost exactly the same, but I'll be really happy to get rid of that Fox Sports North, Bally Sports North, FanDuel Sports North network jingle. They got to replace that. That'll be sweet. I'm excited for that.
Anything on the field you're excited about?
Honestly, no, not really. I mean, it's the same guys. Come talk to me in July or August when they're leading the AL Central and everybody's still healthy. Then we can talk about excitement. Right now, there's really nothing unless you're a big Ty France fan, and I'm just not. So,
Nolan, do you have any optimism for the Twins this season?
I mean, I have optimism in that like you can replicate what you did in 2023. If you don't have all the injuries you had last year, you can get back to the playoffs, maybe win a series, but that's about it. Like they needed to build on that, and instead they just ran it back, and then everybody got hurt, and now they're just running it back again. So you can probably win the Central, you could probably win a playoff series, but congrats Dodgers, you won the 2025 World Series.
Yeah, it's over, man. It's over. Even if they have 4/5 of their starting rotation get hurt, they still have the best starting rotation in baseball because they have so much depth.
Do you think the Dodgers? Yeah, go ahead, Tony. I'll ask you guys this next.
I kind of agree with Nolan and Joe. I think Twins have to, I guess, show me something to get interested in. It's a lot of the same, and I think it's fair to have the same expectations they had last year. So, if they go on a big run, win 20 games, I might be interested, but I don't know.
Have the Dodgers spending as much as they did this offseason in the past couple years and getting literally every star in the sport on their team, sans Mike Trout at this point, has that kind of killed excitement for the rest of the season because of just the foregone conclusion that it's probably going to be the Dodgers that win and it's going to be no one else because of the sheer amount of talent they have in that organization?
Well, yeah, it's stupid. I mean, the game is so imbalanced. There's not parity. It's baseball, so, guys can rise from the minors and become stars in no time. Francisco Liriano style back in 2006. Things like that are possible. Maybe David Festa and Zebby Matthews are just elite, right? And they're just gonna blossom into these superstars, and the Twins all of a sudden have this bona fide starting rotation that's super good, and maybe Royce Lewis, plays 150 games and he has an MVP caliber season, and Carlos Correa's foot doesn't act up on him, or the other foot doesn't act up on him. These things. Byron Buxton, maybe he's made out of plexiglass now and he won't break. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could go right to make the Twins a dangerous team and make them exciting. And if you're winning a lot of games, we know in Minnesota fans will show up and they will cheer them on, especially when they're more watchable and they have potentially new owners. But yeah, man, I mean, right now it's like, let's prove it. The Dodgers have every freaking star in the game. Even when free agency died down, they kept on re-signing stud relievers.
Yeah.
It just kept on happening. Like, look, here's a new guy, 3 years, $56 million. Here's another guy, 4 years, $62 million. And
all of it deferred, of course.
Of course, yes, because baseball's stupid. But we'll talk in 2 years when baseball's locked out and the Dodgers have ruined the game, right? Remember when the NBA fans blamed the Timberwolves for a lockout after Kevin Garnett signed his monster contract, which at the time,
they don't because they're too young. But
yeah, they don't remember those two guys. They were still breastfeeding at the time. But when Kevin Garnett,
they
actually probably were breastfeeding at that time.
I was gonna say I don't think they were born yet. Maybe.
yeah, that's. When he signed that, what was it, 7 years, $121 million or something like that? When that happened, he broke the NBA. The Wolves broke the NBA. We had a lockout, and they had to reset the markets, right? So, I mean, that's what the Dodgers have done. In the long run, maybe it'll be good for everybody, and we'll have more parity. But right now, it's very, very hard to get excited about any potential of winning a championship. Because what good is it when you have a Gophers-like mentality, knowing that, hey, this season's going to happen, we'll enjoy some games, but we know the outcome isn't going to end where we want it to. It's just not fun when you know that they're not going to compete for anything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it feels like with what the Dodgers have done.
Nolan?
Yeah, I guess I'd agree. The only thing that'll be, I guess, compelling is when you get to the World Series and you're cheering for whoever the Dodgers are playing. It's just, it doesn't seem like doesn't seem too exciting much at all. They need to come up with a cap system. I think it's time to do it. The NFL is great because no team can sign everybody. You have to build out a whole roster. You have to do it under these cap constraints. That makes it competitive where you don't really have any team except for, every so often when you get an 0-16 Detroit Lions team. That is just terrible. Otherwise, it's like, even the teams that aren't good, it's basically like they don't have a quarterback. They could get a quarterback and be good. Look at the Commanders this year.
Yeah.
So, leagues like that, it's a lot more fun. Even the NBA, I mean, they didn't even have nearly as much of a problem as baseball, but they changed the second apron, and now teams can't keep spending like they used to be able to in the NBA either.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball's kind of alone with this terrible. The Dodgers can sign whoever they want. The Yankees can sign whoever they want. The Mets can sign whoever they want. And then they'll be good because they've signed every good player. Where you got the AL Central, which is like the whole division combined is basically the Dodgers payroll. So I don't know. That's not super exciting. I don't find it very, very exciting.
You're not excited to have to cheer for the Yankees in the World Series to hope that the Dodgers don't win?
I guess I can hope the Mets get through them next year. That's a little better at least.
Yeah, they're only spending like $400 billion.
Yeah, they're only like $100 million behind the Dodgers or something. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Baseball already has too many games, and it seems like they don't matter, and now they matter even less. So.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
a really good point.
That's as succinct as it needs to be right there. Hey, before we go, I just want to apologize. Not all women can produce breast milk, so you guys might have been formula babies. I'm not sure. So if it was just bottles, I want to correct that. So my apologies if I was wrong.
That's our correction for the day.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, Joe. That's how we're going to end today, because why not end it on an awkward note? So go hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. It does help us get found. Appreciate all 1,000 of you, 1,000 plus of you that have done that. That greatly helps us out. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the channel. We'll talk to you again tomorrow with another topic across Minnesota sports.